welcome back to English at Work. I'm Jenny.
And I'm Alex. This is episode 3 of our English for Meetings series.
In our first 2 episodes, we covered meeting basics and how to participate effectively. Today, we're stepping up to the next level.
Today is all about leading meetings, how to run a productive, efficient meeting from start to finish.
And here's why this matters. Leading meetings well is a critical career skill. It shows leadership, organizational ability, and communication skills.
Even if you're not a manager yet, you'll likely be asked to run meetings at some point. Maybe a project update, a brainstorming session, or a team stand-up.
And honestly, most people are terrible at running meetings. They start late, go off track, run over time, and end without clear outcomes.
So if you can run a good meeting, you immediately stand out. People will want you leading their projects because they trust you'll keep things organized.
Today, we'll give you a complete framework for running effective meetings, from preparation through closing.
Let's dive in.
Let's start before the meeting even begins. Alex, what's the first question someone should ask when they're asked to lead a meeting?
Do we actually need a meeting? This might sound strange, but meetings are expensive in terms of time. If you can accomplish the goal via email or a quick phone call, do that instead.
So what makes something worthy of a meeting?
You need a meeting when you need real-time discussion, when you need to build consensus, when you need to brainstorm together, or when the topic is complex enough that back-and-forth email won't work.
But not just to share information that could be sent in an email.
Right. I'm calling a meeting to tell you about the new policy. That should be an email. I'm calling a meeting to discuss how we'll implement the new policy and address concerns. That's a real meeting.
Okay, so you've determined you need a meeting. What's next?
Define your objective. What do you want to accomplish? Be specific. Not discuss the project, but finalize the project timeline and assign responsibilities.
Why does the objective need to be so specific?
Because if you don't know what success looks like, how will you know when you've achieved it? A clear objective keeps the meeting focused.
What's next after defining the objective?
Decide who needs to attend. This is crucial. Only invite people who truly need to be there.
What makes someone necessary?
They have information others need, they need to make a decision, they'll be implementing what's decided, or their input is critical to the discussion.
What about inviting people just to keep them informed?
Send them the meeting notes instead. Their time is valuable too. A meeting of 10 people for 1 hour isn't 1 hour, it's 10 hours of collective work time.
That's a helpful way to think about it.
Yes, be ruthless about attendance. You can always make people optional. You're welcome to attend, but if you're busy, I'll send you notes.
Now let's talk about the agenda. How do you create a good one?
A good agenda is specific, time-bound, and distributed in advance. List each topic you'll cover, who's leading that discussion, and how long you'll spend on it. Give me an example of a good agenda item versus a bad one. Bad, marketing update. Good, Q4 marketing campaign results, Sarah presenting, 15 minutes, discussion of what's working and what to adjust.
The good one tells people exactly what to expect.
Right. People can prepare. Sarah knows she's presenting, others know they'll be discussing adjustments so they can think about it in advance. How far in advance should you send the agenda? At least 24 hours before, preferably 48 hours or more. Last-minute agendas don't give people time to prepare.
What about including pre-read materials?
Send those with the agenda. Attach the documents and explicitly say, please review these before the meeting. Make it clear what's expected.
What about timing? How long should meetings be?
As short as possible while still accomplishing the objective. Default to 30 minutes instead of an hour if you can. People's attention spans are limited.
What if you need more time?
Then schedule it, but be realistic, and build in breaks for meetings over 90 minutes. People need to stretch and reset.
What about the meeting format? In-person versus virtual?
Consider what's most effective for your objective. Brainstorming might be better in person. Status updates work fine virtually. But be consistent. Don't have some people in a room and others on video. That creates an imbalance.
What's that imbalance?
The people in the room can read each other's body language and have side conversations. The remote people feel like outsiders. If anyone is remote, everyone should join individually from their own computer.
That's a good tip. What's the last piece of preparation?
Prepare yourself. Review all materials. Think through difficult questions that might come up. Know your objectives cold. You're the leader. You need to be the most prepared person in the room.
Now let's talk about how to actually start the meeting. The first 2 or 3 minutes set the tone for everything that follows.
What should you do first?
Start exactly on time, not 5 minutes late when everyone has finally arrived. At the scheduled time, begin.
Even if people are still joining?
Yes, this trains people that your meetings start on time. If you always wait for latecomers, people learn they can be late without consequence.
What if it's the CEO who's late?
That's trickier. You might wait a minute or two for very senior people, but still, start as close to on time as possible.
Okay, so it's 2 o'clock and you're starting. What do you say?
Welcome everyone and thank them for attending. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. Let's get started.
Should you do introductions?
If people don't know each other, absolutely. Let's do a quick round of intros. Please share your name and role. But if it's your regular team, skip this.
What comes next?
State the purpose clearly. The goal of today's meeting is to finalize our Q1 marketing plan and assign ownership for each initiative.
So everyone knows why they're here?
Exactly. This seems obvious, but many meetings start without anyone articulating the goal. Don't assume people remember from the invitation.
Then what?
Review the agenda and timing. We have 4 topics to cover in the next 45 minutes. First, we'll review campaign results for 15 minutes. Then we'll discuss the new product launch strategy.
You're creating a roadmap for the meeting?
Yes, people like knowing what to expect and how long each part will take.
Should you set ground rules?
For important or potentially contentious meetings, yes. A few ground rules. Please silence phones. Let's make sure everyone gets a chance to speak, and we'll use the parking lot for off-topic items.
What's a parking lot in this context?
It's a list on a whiteboard or shared document where you capture good ideas or topics that are off agenda. That's a great point. Let's park that and come back to it later.
So you don't derail the meeting, but you don't lose the idea?
Exactly. You acknowledge the contribution without going off track.
What other ground rules might you set?
Let's be respectful even when we disagree. No interrupting, let people finish their thoughts, start on time, end on time. Whatever is important for your specific group.
Should you assign roles like note-taker or timekeeper?
If you're not doing those yourself, yes. Sarah, could you take notes today? Michael, would you help me keep an eye on time?
And people usually say yes?
Usually, you're giving them a specific, manageable task. Most people are happy to help.
What about setting expectations for participation?
Good idea. I want to hear from everyone today, so I might call on you if you haven't spoken. This gives shy people a heads up and makes it clear everyone is expected to contribute.
What if you're leading a virtual meeting?
Add a tech check. Can everyone see the screen? Can you hear me clearly? Please use the chat or raised hand feature if you have questions.
What's the biggest mistake people make in opening meetings?
Starting late and then not clearly stating the purpose. People are sitting there wondering why they're there and what they're supposed to accomplish.
So a strong opening should take what, 2 or 3 minutes?
2 to 3 minutes max. Welcome, state purpose, review agenda, set ground rules if needed, assign roles, and dive in. Don't waste time.
Okay, you've opened strong, now the meeting is underway. How do you keep it on track?
This is where most meetings go wrong. You need to be an active facilitator, not a passive observer.
What does active facilitation look like?
You're monitoring time, keeping discussion focused, making sure everyone participates, managing conflict, and moving toward decisions.
Let's break those down. First, monitoring time.
Keep an eye on the clock constantly. If you allocated 15 minutes for a topic and you're at 12 minutes with no resolution in sight, you need to intervene.
How do you intervene without being rude?
We have 3 minutes left on this topic. I want to make sure we reach a decision. What do we need to resolve right now versus what can wait?
You're acknowledging the time constraint and forcing prioritization?
Exactly. Or you might say, we're running over on this item. Should we take 5 more minutes and adjust the rest of the agenda, or should we table this discussion and continue it later?
You're giving the group choice while making them aware of the trade-off?
Right. Sometimes the discussion is valuable enough to warrant more time. Sometimes it needs to be cut short. But make it an explicit decision.
Now, keeping discussion focused, how do you do that?
When people go off topic, redirect gently but firmly. That's an important point about office space, but today we're focused on the marketing plan. Can we put the office space discussion in the parking lot?
What if they resist?
Be firmer. I appreciate that this is important to you. Let's schedule a separate time to discuss it. For today, we need to stay focused on our agenda.
What if someone keeps going off on tangents?
After redirecting once or twice, you might need to be more direct. John, I'm going to ask you to hold those thoughts. We're short on time and need to stay on topic.
That feels uncomfortable.
It can be, but it's your job as facilitator. Everyone else will appreciate you protecting their time.
Now let's talk about participation. How do you draw out quiet people?
Ask them directly but warmly. Sarah, you've worked on this before. What are your thoughts? Or, Michael, we haven't heard from you yet. What's your perspective?
What if they say, I don't have anything to add?
Probe gently. Even a quick reaction would be helpful. Or, what concerns do you have about this approach? Make it easy for them to contribute.
What about managing people who dominate the conversation?
This is delicate. You don't want to shut down someone who's contributing, but you need balance. Try redirecting. Thanks, David. Those are good points. Let's hear from others too. What do the rest of you think?
What if they keep interrupting others?
Intervene politely but clearly. David, I'm going to ask you to let Sarah finish her thought. If it continues, speak to them privately after the meeting.
How do you handle disagreements or conflicts during the meeting?
First, remember that disagreement is healthy. You want different perspectives. The problem is when disagreement becomes personal or unproductive.
How do you tell the difference?
Productive disagreement focuses on ideas and evidence. I disagree because the data shows. Unproductive disagreement gets personal. You never listen to my ideas.
So what do you do when it becomes unproductive?
Refocus on the issue. Let's keep this about the strategy, not about people. What evidence do we have to support each approach?
What if two people are really going at it?
Step in firmly. I can see you both feel strongly about this. Let's take a breath. John, summarize your position in 1 minute. Then Sarah, you do the same. Then we'll hear from others.
You're giving structure to the conflict.
Yes, often people just need to feel heard. Once they've stated their position, they can move on.
What about making decisions during the meeting?
Be clear about decision-making authority. Are you deciding by consensus, by vote? Is the leader making the final call?
How do you reach consensus?
Summarize the options. It sounds like we have 3 options on the table. Can everyone live with option B, even if it's not your first choice? You're looking for agreement people can support, not necessarily universal enthusiasm.
What if you can't reach consensus?
Escalate or defer. We're not going to resolve this today. I'll take this to senior leadership for a decision. Or, let's gather more data and revisit this next week.
Is it okay to end a meeting without a decision?
Sometimes you don't have enough information to decide. That's okay, but be explicit about next steps. We'll reconvene on Friday once we have the budget numbers.
Now let's talk about how to end the meeting well. This is where you ensure all that discussion actually leads to action.
What's the biggest mistake people make when closing meetings?
They just let the meeting peter out. Someone glances at the clock and says, "Oh, we're out of time. I guess we should wrap up." And everyone leaves confused about next steps.
What should you do instead?
Reserve the last 5-10 minutes for a structured close. Summarize what was decided, assign action items, and confirm next steps.
Walk me through that, starting with summarizing decisions.
Recap key outcomes. Today we decided to move forward with Plan A, postpone the website redesign until Q2, and hire 2 new developers. Did I miss anything?
Why ask if you missed anything?
It gives people a chance to correct you and ensures everyone has the same understanding. You don't want people leaving with different impressions of what was decided.
Now, action items. How do you assign these clearly?
Be very specific about who, what, and when, not someone should follow up with IT. Instead, Sarah, you'll schedule a meeting with IT by Friday to discuss server capacity.
So you're naming a person, a specific action, and a deadline?
Exactly. And ideally, get verbal confirmation. Sarah, does Friday work for you? She might say, actually, I'm out Thursday and Friday. I can do it Monday.
So you're negotiating the deadline?
Right. You want realistic commitments, not just agreements people can't keep. Better to know now that it'll take until Monday than to expect it Friday and be disappointed.
How many action items is too many?
If you're assigning more than 3 or 4 per person, you probably need to prioritize. People can't remember and execute 10 different things.
What if there are lots of action items across the team?
That's fine, as long as they're distributed. Make sure no one person is overloaded.
Should action items be written down during this closing?
Absolutely. Either the note taker is capturing them or you're writing them on a shared screen. Make them visible so everyone can see and agree.
What about next steps beyond specific action items?
Clarify what happens next. We'll meet again in 2 weeks to review progress. I'll send a calendar invite tomorrow. Or, once Sarah gets feedback from IT, she'll email the team with recommendations.
So people know the chain of events.
Right. No one should leave wondering, now what?
What about following up after the meeting?
Tell them what to expect. I'll send meeting notes by end of day tomorrow with all action items and decisions. Then actually do it. How important are those meeting notes? Critical. They're the permanent record. People forget what was said. The notes are what everyone refers back to. We'll cover meeting notes in detail in episode 8.
What about thanking people?
Yes, always end with appreciation. Thanks everyone for your time and input today. This was productive. People should feel their time was well spent.
What if the meeting didn't go well?
Still thank them. I know we didn't resolve everything today, but I appreciate everyone's perspectives. We'll regroup with more information next week.
How do you officially end the meeting?
Clear statement. That's everything on our agenda. We're adjourned. Or, thanks everyone, we're done for today. Make it clear so people don't awkwardly wonder if they can leave.
What if you're ending early?
Give people their time back. We've covered everything in 35 minutes instead of 60. I'm giving you 25 minutes back. Enjoy. People love efficient meetings.
What if you're running overtime?
Address it explicitly. We're at time and haven't finished. Can everyone stay 10 more minutes? If not, okay, we'll continue this via email, or we'll schedule a follow-up.
How important are virtual meetings to end well?
Same principles, but make sure you actually click End Meeting for everyone rather than just leaving, and give people a moment to say goodbye.
Let's talk about specific challenges that come up when leading meetings. What's one of the most common?
People who come unprepared. You sent materials in advance, but they clearly didn't read them. Now you're wasting meeting time bringing them up to speed.
How do you handle that?
First, prevent it by being clear in your agenda. Please read the attached proposal before the meeting. We'll be discussing implementation, not reviewing the basics.
And if they still don't prepare?
You have a few options. You can spend 5 minutes summarizing, but make it clear you're doing this as a one-time courtesy. Or you can say, the pre-read covered the background. Let's dive into the decision we need to make. If you have basic questions, see me after.
That's pretty direct.
Sometimes you need to be. You're protecting everyone else's time. If people learn they don't need to prepare because you'll always recap, they'll never prepare.
What about meetings that consistently run over time?
This is usually a sign you're trying to cover too much. Either shorten your agenda or schedule longer meetings, but be ruthless about time boxing.
What's time boxing?
Allocating a strict time limit to each topic and moving on when time's up, whether you've reached resolution or not.
Even if the discussion is productive?
You can decide as a group to extend, but make it explicit. This is valuable. Should we take 10 more minutes here and skip the last agenda item? People can make an informed choice.
What about side conversations during the meeting?
They're disruptive and disrespectful. If you notice people chatting, pause and make eye contact with them. Usually that's enough.
If it's not?
Address it politely. I want to make sure everyone can hear. Could we hold side conversations until after? If it's a persistent problem, speak to the individuals privately.
What about participants who don't engage? They're physically present but clearly mentally checked out.
First, make sure your meetings are actually engaging. If people are consistently checked out, maybe your meetings are too long, too frequent, or not relevant to them.
And if the meeting is necessary?
Call on them occasionally. Mark, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Being called on once usually makes people pay attention for the rest of the meeting.
What if you're leading a meeting with very senior people and you're junior?
This can be intimidating. The key is preparation and confidence. You know the material better than they do, that's why you're leading.
Any specific tips?
Be respectful but not deferential to the point of ineffectiveness. You can say, "I'd like to keep us on schedule," even to a VP. Frame it as serving the group's time, not bossing them around.
What about technical difficulties in virtual meetings?
Have a plan B. If screen sharing fails, can you email the document? If audio cuts out, do you have a phone backup? Build in a few minutes of buffer for tech issues.
What if you make a mistake as a meeting leader?
Acknowledge it and move on. You're right, I misspoke. The deadline is Tuesday, not Thursday. Thanks for catching that. Don't dwell on it or get defensive.
What about when you need to make a tough call during the meeting?
Be decisive. People respect leaders who can make decisions, even if not everyone agrees with them. I hear different perspectives. Here's what we're going to do.
Let's recap how to lead effective meetings.
Before the meeting, define your objective clearly. Only invite necessary people. Create a specific time-bound agenda. Send materials in advance and prepare yourself thoroughly.
Opening. Start on time. Thank people for attending. State the purpose clearly. Review the agenda. Set ground rules if needed, and assign roles like note-taker.
During, monitor time religiously. Keep discussion focused. Draw out quiet participants. Manage dominant speakers. Facilitate disagreement productively, and guide the group toward decisions.
Closing. Summarize key decisions. Assign specific action items with names and deadlines. Clarify next steps. Tell people when they'll get meeting notes, and thank everyone for their time.
Handle common challenges. Unprepared participants, discussions running over, side conversations, disengaged attendees, and technical difficulties. Stay calm and decisive.
Next episode, we're covering virtual meeting mastery, the specific challenges and strategies for running effective meetings when everyone is remote.
We'll talk about technology setup, engagement techniques, managing virtual fatigue, and creating connection through a screen.
Until then, this is Jenny.
And Alex from English at Work. If you have a meeting to lead this week, use this framework and see how it transforms the experience. Good luck.